For 35 years, the family of Jacob and Matilda Nestor carried the weight of a crime so brutal. For 32 of those years, their killer, Victor Tony Jones, sat on a death row. This is the story of that crime and how it finally came to an end. On September 30th, 2025, after spending more than 32 years on death row, Victor Tony Jones was executed by lethal injection in the execution chamber of a Florida state prison. In this video, we will reveal what happened on the day of the crime, his last meal, and his final words. On December 19th, 1990, in Miami-Dade, Florida, 29 years old Victor was irreparably broken. He had grown up in poverty, abandoned by his mother at a young age, and raised by relatives. During his adolescence, he spent time at the Florida School for Boys in Okeechobee, a reform school notorious for the physical, psychological, and sexual abuse inflicted. There, Jones endured physical torture, assaults by older inmates, beatings with leather straps, and long periods in solitary confinement. That night, in 1990, Victor had a plan that would change multiple lives forever. His path was no accident. He was heading to Nestor Engineering, a small engineering firm in the Wynwood neighborhood. Victor had only started working there the day before. He knew the place, had observed the schedules, and knew the elderly couple who owned the business were generous with their employees, but his intentions were far from gratitude or loyalty. He had a different plan in mind. Jacob Netter, 67, and his wife, Matilda Nestor, 66, were Jewish immigrants who had moved to Miami from Brooklyn. Jacob was a World War II veteran, an inventor with 17 registered patents, and a man known in the neighborhood for his kindness toward those in need. He had married Dolly, his high school sweetheart, just before leaving for the European front. They had 2 children, Michael Nestor, who would later become a hero during the September 11th attacks, and Irene Pfizer. It was a loving family. Jacob and Matilda were happily married and deeply in love. The Nestors had a habit of hiring people in vulnerable situations, paying them daily without asking too many questions about their backgrounds. They offered work purely out of kindness. This is how Victor came to be employed there. Victor entered the business with a clear plan to steal money targeting a family of considerable means. When Dolly headed to the bathroom at the back of the building, Victor silently approached her from behind and stabbed her at the base of her neck with a knife. The wound was devastating. It severed her aorta, causing massive bleeding. Hearing the attack, Jacob rushed out of the main office to defend his wife, but Victor confronted him and stabbed him directly in the chest, piercing his heart. Yet, Jacob Netter was not a man to give up easily. Despite being mortally wounded, the war veteran managed to retreat to his office where he kept a .22 caliber pistol. For approximately 20 to 25 minutes, according to later testimonies, Jacob struggled against Victor while losing blood. In that desperate moment, his intentions were clear to defend his wife to the very end. Finally, Jacob managed to grab his gun and fired 5 shots at Victor. One of the bullets struck Victor in his forehead, a wound that should have left him dead, but miraculously, it did not kill him. A UPS driver making a routine delivery discovered the crime scene. When paramedics and police arrived, they found Jacob and Dolly Nestor dead. Jacob was sitting on the sofa with his wife's purse in his lap and a bottle of whiskey nearby. Victor Jones was slumped on a sofa in the main office, conscious but gravely injured. 2 lives had been ended for just a few $100s, yet the police were not far behind. The investigation moved quickly, and Victor was found agonizing with cash, keys, credit cards, and personal belongings of both victims in his pockets, confirming the motive of robbery. Victor was rushed to the hospital for treatment of his gunshot wound and made incriminating statements. He confessed to a nurse that he had killed the couple because they owed him money. Authorities and the family found this claim unbelievable, as the Nestors were well known for helping people in need. Prosecutors would later say the case was essentially solved immediately. Physical evidence, Victor's own statements, and the clear motive provided detectives with everything they needed. Victor was arrested at once, but it took time for him to stand trial. In February 1993, the judicial process finally began. By then, the state had compiled a mountain of evidence, including Victor's hospital confessions and physical evidence directly linking him to the crime. On February 1st, 1993, the jury found Victor guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder and 2 counts of armed robbery. That same afternoon, the sentencing phase began. The jury had to decide: life imprisonment without parole or the death penalty. Victor's attorneys tried to present mitigating evidence regarding his difficult childhood and the abuse he suffered at the reform school. But in 1993, this information was not fully recognized by the state. The jury recommended the death penalty for both murders, for Dolly Netter's death by a 10-2 margin, and for Jacob Netter's death unanimously. A month later, on March 1st, 1993, the judge reviewed the case and agreed. Victor was sentenced to die. The court cited clear aggravating factors. The murders were committed during a robbery, and he had killed innocent people for money. His relative youth was considered a mitigating factor, but ultimately, it did not matter. The brutality of the crime outweighed everything else. Although he had been sentenced to death, Victor probably did not expect that more than 3 decades would pass before the sentence was finally carried out. Over the years, he filed appeal after appeal, seeking a way out, claiming intellectual disability and trauma from the institutional abuse he suffered in his youth. In 2024, in an unexpected turn, Florida officially recognized the systematic abuse in reform schools where Victor had spent his childhood. In January 2025, the Florida Attorney General's office sent Victor a letter, formally acknowledging that he had been a victim of institutional abuse. And in July, they deposited financial compensation into his prison account. Despite this, his conviction and death sentence remained in place. Meanwhile, after 32 years on death row, Victor's time was running out. A date was finally set: September 30th, 2025. The legal battles had ended, and the state was preparing to carry out the sentence. Michael Neester, a 9/11 hero, had passed away in 2020 from brain cancer, believed to be related to inhaling toxic substances present in the dust of Ground Zero. Throughout his life, he carried the pain of having lost his parents and the wish to witness the execution of their killer. It is remarkable how different people's lives can be. Victor, a murderer who took the lives of a married couple, and in contrast, Michael Neester, their son, who became a hero during one of the greatest tragedies in history, saving many lives. During his lifetime, Michael wrote 2 books recounting his experiences. Since Michael could no longer be present, and because of the profound loss experienced by the family, many surviving relatives decided to attend Victor's execution, including his sister. Irene Pfizer, now 76 years old, had carried that wound for 35 years. She was old enough when the crime occurred to understand what had happened, and the weight of that tragedy had followed her for decades. She had witnessed how every headline, every hearing, and every appeal focused on Victor. Now, with the execution scheduled for September 30th, Irene surprised many by publicly declaring, "Yes, I forgive him." On August 29, 2025, Governor Ron DeSantis signed the execution order, setting the date for September 30th, 2025. The clock kept ticking, and the state moved forward with the scheduled execution. Finally, Victor Tony Jones was executed on September 30th, 2025, at 6:13 p.m. at Florida State Prison near Stark, becoming the 13th execution of the year in the state and setting a historic record. That day, he woke up at 4:30 a.m., met with a spiritual advisor, and received no other visitors, remaining cooperative throughout, according to officials. His last meal request was fried chicken, collard greens, and sweet tea. Already strapped to the gurney and about to receive the lethal injection, he was asked if he had any final words, to which he simply replied, "No, sir." The execution was carried out by lethal injection using the standard 3-drug protocol with no complications, according to Governor's spokesperson Alex Lanone. What do you think about the execution that just took place? Do you believe it was just or not? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to keep up with the next executions.